Hey, everybody. Welcome into an all-new episode of Can We Please Talk podcast. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
And I'm Nick Severi.
On the program today, Nick, a trial in New York City is happening against a former president. We haven't even discussed it, and it's almost about to wrap up. Nick and I weigh in on the latest from the Manhattan courtroom, all the happenings in the trial, Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels. If you're getting sick of these names, trust me, I'm with you on that. And more importantly, are any of these names or this case going to sway any voters come November? We're going to talk about all of that and more in just a bit. Plus, later on in the program, our Can I Talk segment is back. 5 minutes unfettered. Nick's got a bone to pick with a member of the tribe, a.k.a. Vivek Ramaswamy. And I'm going to explain to Kathy Hochul how kids in the Bronx do, in fact, know what a computer is. But more on that after the break. Some quick housekeeping notes before I say hello to my co-host, Nick Severi. All new episodes of the Double Jab podcast are out there now. A new show over on Leon Media Network hosted by our buddy Rich Quinones. An all-new boxing program. This is a great show because Rich has been working in boxing for forever. He's a play-by-play announcer for BXNG TV. All new episodes now of Double Jab. See, he's got Back Your Play and he's got Double Jab are out on Leon Media Network. As Rich is getting you set up in this first episode, he interviews a legendary boxing trainer, Bob Santos, and also a WBA Continental title holder, Kevin Brown, who's getting ready for his Friday, May 31st fight against Idalberto Umara. Rich has got all the boxers that are going to be fighting in this card on Friday, May 31st at the Caribe Royale Hotel in Orlando. If you live in the Orlando area, Tampa, Sarasota, head to Ticketmaster.com. Click the link in our show notes now to get tickets. You'll get a little discount there. Apply at checkout, or you can watch the fight live on The Zone and listen to all new episodes of the Double Jab podcast over on LeonMediaNetwork.com or wherever you get your pods. And also, an all new episode of the Educate US podcast is out there. This week, Nick, Stacy, and Patrice are doing something in my backyard, joined by the Moms for Libros co-founders Lisette and Vanessa Brito to talk about all the work they are doing here in the state that I reside in, everything that's happening with all the education news that's been coming out of the state recently. Even Nick has done a segment on television about that. All new episodes of the Educate US podcast. You can download it wherever you get your pods or listen to it over on LeonMediaNetwork.com. All right, now I say hello to Nick Severi. Nick, I'm interested. Well, first off, I want to know how you're doing, but I'm also interested because, you know, like you and I have been texting about this Trump trial, and I know we're going to get into it in a second, and I got some clips for you, some of the coverage, some of the stuff that Trump has been doing outside of the courtroom, which I've got to tell you right now, as somebody who wanted to be a lawyer, not a criminal defense attorney, I don't think, but man, if I was one, I would be losing my, you know what, at this guy just going off the cuff. Again, anybody. It's not necessarily him. It's anybody, any defendant that is out there rambling and saying things that make no sense, A, and B, could damage the case. Like, you got to criticize anybody who does that. And it's wild to me, this whole like, well, that's the way he is. Well, then he's an idiot. Then he's proving he's an idiot. Like, you're just feeding into the narrative that you're an idiot. I mean, you have the right to remain silent. It's literally in there, Nick. It's in the Miranda rights. Like, I don't understand why this guy's not remaining silent. We're going to get into it in a second, but the trial has been funny to watch because I've put it on maybe for one time over these last 3 weeks. I have not been paying attention to it. It's not on TV. These people are reading passages from what they're hearing play out in court. And I don't think it's the there that everybody wants it to be. But how are you doing before we get into the trial stuff with Trump?
I'm good. You know, actually today, earlier today, we had my oldest kid had her, spring concerts. She's in third grade. So she sang, the other kids sang too. So it was fun. I think I'm becoming a grumpier and grumpier old man because the little things get to me. There we go.
Yeah,
we should have a segment on the show, right? Grumpy old man.
Right.
So today for me, so the third graders sing, it's great. Fourth graders sing, it's great. Fifth graders sing, it's great. But somehow, for some reason, during the fifth grade singing, I look over and there are these like 3 or 4 moms just having a full-blown conversation. Like, what are you doing? I imagine none of them have kids in fifth grade, so it just became open season. Like, stop. Like, you're seeing kids on the stage doing their thing. Shut the hell up. It's not that important. Or just leave the room. Like, whatever happened to people just using common sense? And if you approach someone and it becomes, well, don't tell me what to do and blah, blah, blah. Like people are just assholes sometimes. Like
Right.
I just like just this lack of decency is all I'm saying. Then in front of me, you got this young lady who's got Beats headphones on. Folks, we've got headphones on during a public event. Does this not register? Is just odd? And I
Right.
tried to be sympathetic because I'm looking at this kid. I'm thinking, maybe she needs it for some kind of like she has a particular, hearing need or something. I've never seen someone that has Beats headphones on because they have a hearing condition. This is just some fashionable thing, but it looks disrespectful. Like you have people just up on stage singing. Not to mention, by the way, my kid shared this with me of, a little bit of that nervousness because I got to get up there and I'm singing in front of all these parents and stuff. You know, Kids are already, and take her and multiply that by like 50. These kids are doing their thing, and you're just sitting here like a moron, sitting here with your Beats,
Right. Right.
Dr. Dre. Like, like
Right.
what
And
are
I'm
we
sure
doing?
the kids looking out into the crowd see that, right? Somebody with
Sure.
giant
Like,
headphones.
yeah, like I don't care about your fashion here. I need to see some visible ears. Is that so much to ask? I'm just saying.
Hey, I don't disagree with you. Luckily I'm not in that. I've gone to one little thing that, again, mine just turned 5, my oldest. And so she had something like around Christmas, but it was a small performance. But I mean, again, 5, 6 kids like that's easier to manage.
You'll join soon enough. Like you go to enough family events and you see things like that, and especially when it's your kid involved, it's just like people can grow up. Like we're the adults. We should be the role models for the kids, and here we are not doing right by them.
Well, you just fed into the follow-up perfectly because you just said it right there about the adults not being, acting like the kids in the room. I'm good. I'm doing well. I'm doing better than Donald Trump. I will tell you that much because I'm not in court. And let's get into that in our first segment here, Nick, because um, the former president, for people who have not been following this or watching this, obviously the only trial that is going to potentially happen in 2024 before the November election is this hush money trial that is playing out in Manhattan District Court. And obviously, there's been some key people that have been testifying. If you know anything about the Trump org and folks that worked with him, and if you followed the 2016 campaign, obviously there was an alleged affair with this former porn star called Stormy Daniels. And obviously, at the root cause of this, was the former attorney for Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, who actually went to jail for this. He is the one who made a payment to Stormy Daniels in a hush money payment so that the story wouldn't get published. The crime, you ask, is because it was using campaign funds and falsifying business records to pay out that $130,000. Well, anyway, to summarize all that, the trial's been going on over the last couple of weeks. We've been touching on it briefly. We touched on it at the high level in terms of ranking all these cases with other former attorneys and stuff like that. But we really haven't actually talked about this. And the trial is almost over. There's only a few more weeks left. There's obviously the Memorial Day break that's coming up at the end of the month. So I don't know if the case will be wrapped up before then or the immediate week after, but you're going to have obviously a day or two off during that cycle. And so there's, the prosecution is still calling the last of their witness, of which Michael Cohen is the main one. And then the defense is going to put on their case, and we'll see if the former president will take the stand and testify. Prosecutors have played an audio recording of Trump directing Cohen to use cash to buy Karen McDougal's story is some of the latest developments that happened. Karen McDougal was another alleged affair that the former president had before the 2016 election. And like I mentioned, 34 counts of falsifying business records is all about this because the reimbursement payments were put in through this campaign fund usage. And that's why obviously there's charges in that, whether the charges actually net onto anything that he'll serve jail time. We've had lawyers come on the show say no because of his age, his priors, the fact that he could appeal this. The appeal courts take forever. Will it sway public opinion? Who knows? It's not on TV. We're going to find out all that. But take a listen to the way the trial's been playing out in terms of the media coverage of it. Take a listen to this.
Definitely the most memorable moment in a memorable week. I mean, you were in the courtroom for Stormy Daniels. I mean, you'll remember that 30 years from now. The jurors will certainly remember it a few weeks from now when they're deliberating. To me, the key moment was her cross-examination, because that's really when the story gets told.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump's team started really effectively on cross-examination. The very first thing they asked her right out of the gate, do you hate this defendant? Do you hate Donald Trump? And she said, yes, I do. I mean, right there is bias. That's a straightforward answer. Give her credit. It's an honest answer. But you can argue to the jury, she hates him. She has every incentive. The second day of cross-examination, which I guess was yesterday morning, though, I think things fell apart for Trump's team. I think they strayed from the solid basis they have. And when they started examining her about her career in the pornography industry, I thought that really missed the mark. I don't think there's any relevance to it. It felt like they were just trying to smear her.
He asked me if I wanted to get fired on the first day if I asked about the bill, Cohen says, while smiling at the memory. Oh.
This goes straight to the question of why Michael Cohen did not go rogue and come up with this. He knew Donald Trump stiffed people.
So Michael Cohen is looking right ahead of him at Susan Hoffinger, the prosecuting attorney, while testifying. He has not looked over to his left to the jury.
Just a couple things we're going to hear. He once told the judge, I felt it was my duty to cover up his, meaning Donald Trump's, dirty deeds, and that he's going to say he lied in court. He did it in the service of Donald Trump.
All right. So you heard a little bit there across the spectrum of Friday, because last week Stormy Daniels testified. And again, she's at kind of the center core of this because of the alleged affair. And you heard our buddy Ellie Honig there kind of breaking down some of the way the cross-examination went, and then also some of the way that they've propped her up prosecution-wise. The last clip that you heard there was Jamie Gangel from CNN, Jake Tapper, actually reading out what was playing out in the court. Like I mentioned, this is not televised. So what the networks are doing to supplant that, and again, I hate this. So if they're listening, producers, please start changing the way you do this. They have an 8-person panel. You don't need 8 people. And they have 2 moderators. You don't need 2 moderators. You can have one. You can rotate them every 3 hours. And they're doing this, with all these people and differing opinions. And then on the split screen is the testimony playing out in court. So it's getting fed back to them either from reporters in the court that work for the network, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's being displayed on screen, what the prosecutor's asking, what the witness is answering with, and then obviously tone and inflection of what's happening in the courtroom. And my biggest issue, and like I mentioned before, Nick, and it's not me saying it now, Nick, it's polling that has been saying it. I want to read you a poll that recently came out, but this trial is not televised. So people are not moved by it, at least it seems like, and I'm going to give some data points on that in a second, because they can't see what's happening. They only see still images of him. Like I said, the networks are devoting all this coverage to it because it's a former president. And I get that. But as legal analysts have all told us, it's the weakest of the 4. And it's the only one that's going to happen before 2024. If he becomes president again, he's going to get rid of all the other charges. And if he loses, then 25 will be an interesting watch to see what happens with the rest of these cases. But recent polling from The Hill, this came out last week, Nick. Fewer Americans believe the hush money trial will end with a Trump conviction. This was a poll that happened from May 5th through the 7th. Over 1,800 registered voters in a YouGov Economist survey was released. And it said of the 1,800 respondents, around 39% of Democrats said Trump would be convicted. That was back in April for the same polling. Now it says 34%. 21% of independents believed conviction would happen late last month. Now that the trial has unfolded, 17% say that he will be found guilty of something. GOP voters, same thing. The dip in percentage. Now it says 14%. Based upon this poll, again, 1,813 Americans surveyed in this poll. Only 22% of Americans think Trump will be convicted in the Manhattan case overall. Okay? So polling is showing that they don't think that this is the there, like I said before. But the networks are treating it like it's the there. I compare it, Nick, sports analogy, to the Pro Bowl. This is the Pro Bowl. Yeah, it's football players. Yeah, they're kind of playing football. But does this mean anything? Would anybody else? And again, everyone, biggest thing I always say on TV, you can't glean sometimes politically where people lean. You're supposed to be like that. So that way you can kind of show this neutrality, or at least this aura of neutrality. But a lot of the times the people don't upright or upfront tell you how they feel about something. So you're trying to glean based on what they're saying. So hear me now, okay? I didn't vote for Donald Trump in 2016. I didn't vote for him in 2020. Not voting for him in 24, 32, hut. I don't care. Not voting for him. But this case is, in my opinion, a nothing burger. And that if anybody else was charged with this, they would not be bringing this forward. And this is not me saying this, Nick. Ellie Honig, who you heard in the clip, came on this show, former Southern District of New York prosecutor. He's friends with Alvin Bragg, the DA in this case. I don't want to play the buzzword game and stuff like that. You know, Nick and I don't play that game. But he said if he had been working, and again, you can listen to the episode when he came back on a few months ago before the trial. He said if he had been working in the SDNY at the time, SDNY did not pursue this. The Department of Justice in the New York Southern District did not pursue this. This is Manhattan that's pursuing this. The former DA before Alvin Bragg did not pursue this. Michael Cohen went to jail for this already. So again, it's, I don't want to feed into the Trump mania of what he says of how everybody's politically motivated against him with Letitia James and Fani Willis and Alvin Bragg. But of this one specifically, just from everything we've seen so far of the trial, the charges, what he could face jail time, which is nothing potentially to 4 years, but he wouldn't serve 4 years. How are you going to do that with the Secret Service guarding the penitentiary? Like this is not the there. And, I know there are people that want him to be held to justice. And I agree with that because of what happened on January 6th. Or with the respective Mar-a-Lago cases. But let's be honest, when we're looking at this right now, this polling is showing is not swaying public opinion with that number that I just gave you, over 1,800 people surveyed for that. And you got two hosts here on this show that lean a little different politically on certain things that are both nodding in agreement that, hey, this isn't it for this guy. What do you make of it, sir?
It feels a little like Bill Clinton all over again. I'm reminded of being, a sophomore at Rutgers in a communication class. Actually, Professor Miller was our instructor. I think it was Communications 102. So here I am in this huge lecture hall. And around this time, the story broke. Now, I don't know if Professor Miller was talking about it or it was just all over the place. And I remember feeling then, as I do now, which is, I just don't care. At the end of the day, we're talking about someone who had consensual sex with two women, both of which have been, one of which was a model, one of which is in the adult film industry. And in both cases, to let it be known that he did this would bring upon him public shame. Granted, he's a shameless person, so whatever. So he decides to buy them off. Now, of course, the question is, did he use campaign money to do that? And that's obviously the point of contention here. Whether he did or he did not, I honestly don't care. I'll let the lawyers sort that out and the judge. So if he's found guilty, he's found guilty. He's found not guilty, he's not guilty. Does it sway my vote? No. And it's not, I just look at this and I think Nothing Burger is the best assessment of it. I'm certainly more interested in what's going on, what happens in Georgia. I think the effort to try to flip an election at the state or, try to elect, that particular case asking for 11,000 votes, like that to me feels criminal. That to me cuts to the heart of, your democracy possibly getting shredded because someone just wants to cheat the system and just magically find votes. That to me is a bigger deal. The testimony and the involvement of Stephanie Clifford. And by the way, folks, that is her name, Stephanie Clifford. I just did a quick search on this.
Right.
Calling her Stormy Daniels is like referring to Sylvester Stallone as Rambo. Like in the trial today, Rambo was on the stand. No, like that's her actress name. And it's this weird thing of, well, she does adult film. We think less of her. Shut up, folks. Adam Sandler does trash movies. Do you see me here referring to him as Billy Madison whenever I ran into him in person? Of course not. Grow up.
Nick, that's very funny. The Rambo thing is, at first off, I did not know her name was Stephanie Clifford. We're not going to know
Yeah.
how I know that she's Stormy Daniels. We'll get into that in another episode.
I think it was reported on CNN, but I agree with you about the hype that comes out of reporting. I know Katie Fang at MSNBC was like live tweeting testimonies from Michael Cohen. You think the fixer is going to tell me anything I didn't know?
Right.
And one thing I'll also bring up too, before going back to you though, is so there was a comment, I think it was MSNBC last week. I was listening to this, in the podcast format, or at least via Sirius Radio. And, part of this interest in, paying off and also getting an NDA from Ms. Clifford was the perception that shortly before this happened, there's the release of the Access Hollywood tape, where Trump is on tape saying that, as a wealthy person, he could touch women however he wants, right? And this allegedly would have drawn ire from voters and women would be so upset. Folks, even with that recording, 53% of white women voted for Trump. There are not many metrics in the history of our electoral system that I will remember till the day I die. That may be the one. Because if women really cared about this, you wouldn't come in droves to vote for this man. Like, right. I'm not going to sit here and shame white women for that, but come on.
No, I was going to add, USA Today ran an article recently about this, that if former President Donald Trump is convicted on all counts in New York, he could theoretically face more than a decade in prison. The next sentence in that article says, most legal experts we interviewed for the USA Today article said such a dramatic outcome is unlikely. Instead, he would likely be sentenced to something between probation or 3.5 years in prison. And he would still be out because of appeal, free to campaign for president as the, obviously nominee for the Republican side. So again, this thing, it's not that, because we've gotten this a few times with comments on our TikTok and YouTube. Follow us on YouTube and TikTok. Can we please talk podcast? IG, can we please talk podcast? Twitter, can we please talk? We've gotten this in the comments because obviously, we're doing TV hits for a few different networks. And Nick and I are not lawyers. We agree with that. And that's why we bring lawyers on, right? But again, I'm not trying to advocate for Donald Trump to a voter, to anybody. I'm not here to be a spokesperson for him, to say that, yes, he's being criminally persecuted. I'm not saying any of that. Okay, so don't mistake our words here, because both things can be right at the same time. He can be a danger to democracy based on his words and actions that happened in 2021. And this also, the statute of limitations on this are old. And this is falsifying business records that somebody else already went to jail for, of which the prosecution called to the stand today and admitted he lied before Congress. He lied in the previous trial where he got sentenced. He lied for Trump his whole career. I mean, again, Nick and I, we do not have MAGA hats on. We do not have the T-shirts on. We're not at the rallies. You all know that. But let's be honest about this. Like, this is not the there that, and I keep saying that because I can't think of anything else that is truly encompassing of this. And I think the biggest thing for me is, as Trump is always headline grabbing and there's a lot of attention around him. And obviously we saw during his administration how much his pressers were covered and how many views and how many watches during the 2020 stuff with the COVID pressers were being watched. But the thing is, right now, this trial's not on TV. You're not seeing this happen in real time. Courts are not allowed in the camera. So these networks are trying to blow it out, but the game's not televised. So nobody's really tuning in to watch this, and we're getting information secondhand. And the data is telling us that based on these polls that have started to come out about this. So I did want to talk about it at a high level because, again, will it sway public opinion? Will there be a conviction before, mid-June? We're going to find out. The RNC convention is in July, and obviously the Democratic convention is in August. They're in Milwaukee and Chicago, respectively. Yours truly and Nicholas Savary will be doing something around the convention. So stay tuned for all that. And where we'll be doing it will be announced soon. But again, this is going to be the only trial that happens before 2024. And I think specifically for Democrats that we've seen from the sample polling, some of them are treating this like it's the Super Bowl. And it's just not. It's the Pro Bowl. Like I said, they're playing the game. Okay. But again, this isn't the one that truly counts and should get all the eyeballs and attention. And it may not sway public opinion. It really may not sway public opinion. And that's not me saying it. That's not Nick saying it. That's the polling data saying it. All right, listen, when we come back after the break, speaking of data swaying public opinion, Nick and I are going to get 5 minutes each. Our Can I Talk segment is back. Nick's got a bone to pick with a guy who dropped out of the presidential race in January, but for some reason he's back in the news. Then I got a bone to pick with the governor of the state I used to live in and grew up in New York, and Kathy Hochul. When we come back after the break. This episode is presented by our friends over at SeatGeek, SeatGeek.com. Your next best night ever is waiting. SeatGeek's got the tickets, NBA, NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball in full swing, concerts out the wazoo, comedy shows, whatever you want to go to, SeatGeek has got you covered. Nick, did you finally use the promo code to head out to an event and get $20 off with our promo code?
Finally. I got a chance to check out the Phillies locally this year, so I was excited. It was awesome deal and got some great seats.
See, there you go. And I got to go to a Marlins game down here in Miami. If you live anywhere right now where an NBA team or NHL team is playing, you want to go see your team in action, do me a favor, download the SeatGeek app or go to SeatGeek.com right now. Put the tickets in the cart. When you get to checkout, enter in the promo code, Can We Please Talk, all one word. You're going to get $20 off that first purchase. Head over to SeatGeek.com or download the SeatGeek app today. Nick, today's episode is presented as always by our friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Since 2009, their passion has always been bringing you gourmet coffees from all over the world, roasted fresh to order. I got my coffee snob here, Nick Savary. Nick, tell these people, coffee snob it up here. Tell these people why Fresh Roasted Coffee is so good and why they're the official sponsor of Can We Please Talk.
You know, often the best cup of coffee that you're ever going to have is the one you can make from home. And you need good quality coffee to do that. And that's what Fresh Roasted Coffee offers. You know, between single origin, between blends, flavors, anything on the coffee spectrum they've got. But more importantly, and I can't stress this enough, often when you purchase coffee, you don't know where to start. I mean, there's so many different varieties, so many different opportunities, so many different things you could choose from. And Fresh Roasted Coffee just gives you a very simple questionnaire and just says, hey, figure out what your coffee cup is. Figure out what blend works for you. I've gotten some single origin recommendations, so has Mike, and that's influenced everything. And what they recommend, you can get in a Keurig cup, the way Mike takes it. You can take it in the way I do it, which is typically through a French press, or you can get it for a percolator. Whatever coffee machine you've got, they've got you covered. But more importantly, just a huge variety and a way to learn more about coffee itself.
And all of this is available at freshroastedcoffee.com on their site. One cup is all it takes to fall in love with Fresh Roasted Coffee, but you get a discount for being a listener of Can We Please Talk. Enter in the promo code Can We Please Get 20 to get 20% off your first purchase. Head to freshroastedcoffee.com today. All right, it's back by popular demand. Segment we love to do, and it's called
Can I Talk?
All right, in this week's segment, Nick has an issue with a member of his tribe. We're going to get to that in a second. And I have an issue with somebody calling out my people in the Bronx. So, Nick, I'm going to let you go first. 5 minutes is all yours to talk about the man they like to call Vivek Ramaswamy.
You know, last week, and it's now been pretty publicly available at this point, Vivek has a show, a podcast, but there's a YouTube component of it called Truth. Insert joke there. On the show, he leads off with a monologue and then brings on a guest. His most recent guest, of course, was noted conservative pundit, punching bag, whatever you want to call her, Ann Coulter. At the start of their interview, it took an interesting turn for racial politics, and we heard the following.
That's why I brought on today somebody who I think has some thoughtful perspectives on the future direction of our country, of our conservative movement, and on this question of nationalism and national identity, somebody I've been fascinated by for a long time and have interacted with on social media, but for the first time we're having at least a live form conversation in the offline sense of it. It's Ann Coulter. So Ann, thanks for coming on, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. Thanks for having me. That was a fantastic opening monologue. I too am a fan of yours. So I'm going to make a point of disagreeing with you so that it will be fun. You are so bright and articulate, and I guess I can call you articulate since you're not an American Black. Can't say that about them. That's derogatory. And that was a great opening segment. Lots of things to talk about there. Oh, and I agreed with many, many things you said during, in fact, probably more than most other candidates when you were running for president. But I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian. We'll get back to that.
When someone decides to be an outright bigot, that person doesn't get the yada yada their way through it. When you say, well, I wouldn't vote for you because of your ethnicity, but we'll get back to that. No, you gargoyle. We're going to stop right here and we're going to have a conversation. So first off, this is why Vivek's no longer allowed at the meetings, by the way. And I say that jokingly about Indian people, but there's not many Indian people I talk to who are fans of Vivek. It's one thing to desperately cling to whiteness and to try to be white adjacent. It's quite another to have someone on your show openly insult you to your face and then proceed to have a conversation. You could talk to Ann Coulter all you want, but if she's going to lead off and say, I'm not going to vote for you because of your race. And oftentimes conservatives like to mince words about racism. Is it actually racist? Was it implied? This is the type of rhetoric or rhetorical skill that someone like Ben Shapiro likes to play in the sandbox with. This one was just naked racism. What Mike just played is not an edited clip. You can actually go to the YouTube clip or the YouTube episode and just listen to the whole thing. And she does indeed lead with, well, I wouldn't vote for you because you're Indian. At that point, it's on Vivek as just having a decency to stop and say, can we just talk about that for a second? Or like we do on the show, can we please talk? But to just let that pass, shame on you, man. I believe he's a first generation Indian like I am. And it is incomprehensible to me to have someone say to your face that I discredit you because of who you are. To Vivek's credit, Harvard graduate, extremely wealthy, by all measures, as an American citizen, extremely successful. What is Ann Coulter, other than a punching bag at the average roast by someone like Jeff Ross? There's really nothing of accomplishment for her. Somehow she manages to get her face on Bill Maher's couch every couple episodes of Real Time, and she does the rounds. But there's nothing of success to note for this individual. But simply because Vivek is an Indian, she couldn't vote for him. Who gives a damn who she would vote for? This is what I mean when I talk about people who have unserious people on their show. And that's exactly what we saw. Later in that interview, Ann decides to go from insulting Indians to Catholics. You listen later on, she'll then say about American Catholics that American Catholics have become Protestant. Really? Sure. You sure about that? I know plenty of American Catholics who don't consider themselves as such. But she was playing the racial politics of what it means to be a WASP in America. Later on, perhaps one of my favorite segments as a student of history, they had an exchange about what it means to be a citizen. And they both agreed that citizenship at one point meant loyalty. Vivek, actually in the interview, talks about, before citizenship was, and these were his words, about what I get. It was about who I am and what I represent to where I live. And then Ann, of course, being a white supremacist, basically says that it's not about what your area gives to you, but what you contribute to it. And they both agree by the Roman definition of citizenship, it wasn't even about having the privilege to vote. I'm sorry, if I don't have the ability to vote, how can you ever consider me a citizen? And I would ask Vivek, when Indians did not have the ability to vote for members of British Parliament, even though we were a colony, would you have considered us citizens? Vivek has always been frustrating to listen to. He's always sounded rehearsed. It's in many ways why he's not the candidate, but also in many ways is because of what Ann said. There are a sizable number of Republicans who would not have voted Vivek simply because he's an Indian. And what I would ask Vivek if I were to talk to him, and maybe we have him on the show, is why do you continue to cozy up to racists?
All right, sir, you got to call out your person of the week and get that off your chest. Now let me call out my person of the week. Listen, if you missed a few weeks ago, or it may have been a week ago or so as of this recording, New York Governor Kathy Hochul made a statement as she was doing a panel. And I forget what the panel was in reference to, but she started talking about inner city, specifically the Bronx and public schools in the Bronx, and talking about African Americans and Blacks that live in the Bronx. And I mean, they don't know what computers are. Take a listen to this.
Young Black kids growing up in the Bronx who don't even know what the word computer is. They don't know. They don't know these things. And I want the world open up to all of them, because when you have their diverse voices innovating solutions through technology, then you're really addressing society's broader challenges.
All right. So a couple of things here. You can tell by my complexion, I'm maybe part of the tribe. I'm like a quarter, my dad's Afro-Cuban. So I'm going to stand up for the African-American community. All right. Even though I am a pseudo member of it, let's say. But also, I'm from the Bronx. I'm one of those kids that she referenced in terms of talking about kids in the Bronx don't know what computers are. In 1993, Carlos Leon, my father, worked with Our Lady of Nativity and the school district out on 233rd in the east side of the Bronx to be able to put computers and create a computer lab for this school district. Okay, so 30 computers, CPUs with the monitors, keyboards, getting this inside of a school district for the first time in a long time. That, when computers, in the advent of computers back in 93 and 94, they were just starting to come around, and some of these schools did not have the funding to be able to set up computers. My dad did this as a side job. So he went around to different school districts in the Bronx, because obviously we lived on 238th and Byron Avenue in the Bronx, is where I grew up. And my dad went around to a couple school districts there, including St. Francis of Rome, where I ended up going for middle school, PS 16, where I did, K through fourth grade, and setting up these schools. And more importantly, to have computer labs, to have the ability to give kids the advantage to use the computers at school, to learn typing and some of these other things. So I come at this story from a different angle, because normally Nick is the education guy on here. Nick can speak to about the education and the disadvantages of teaching in the public schools of New York City versus teaching in Westchester County, for example. So I don't want to break it up too much into the education realm, but I do want to make this a little bit personal, because Kathy Hochul said something that I think is so problematic with the progressive left. And I'm stealing this from somebody that I saw on Twitter say this. And they said, just let somebody on the left, on the progressive left, talk to you about racism. And after you hear them talk, you may end up being a conservative. And I remember seeing that tweet posted somewhere. And then I heard Kathy Hochul, who I think is well-intentioned in terms of talking about the problem. She's just addressing it wrong. And then threw, oh, by the way, a slight jab at African Americans not knowing anything about computers. They all have smartphones, these kids in schools. Of course they know about computers. They're walking around with one in their pocket. But more importantly, if you really want to tackle the challenges that are facing not only African Americans and Latinos in the Bronx, let's talk about the economic disadvantages. When Nick and I first started the show in the third episode, I asked Nick about systemic racism in schools. And what I mean about systemic racism is looking at the entirety of the situation. I lived on 238th and Byron Avenue. The schools that I went to were in the bottom half of the state. Student to teacher ratio was 13-1. The average salary in the area is around $40,000 to $45,000 a year. Schools are in the bottom. And within a 2.5 mile radius of my school and my house, foods and high trans fats are sold in that area, from Burger King to Taco Bell, all these processed food places. It wasn't until my dad in 1994 moved us up to Westchester County and Harrison High School, 45 minutes north. And do you know the percentage of people living there that are African American and Latino? It's under 12%. In the Bronx, it was 90%. The teacher to student ratio is less, 9-1. The average salary, $75,000 a year and more. The schools ranked in the top 250 nationally, top 25 in the state of New York, just 45 minutes north. So if you truly want to address the problems, Kathy Hochul, let's start by looking at the actual rankings of the schools and looking at the economic disadvantages in those communities. This isn't rocket science. I don't even work in education, but I just solved the problem for you. And more importantly, I did it all using my computer. We leave it there. As always, you want to watch the video portions of any of the episodes that we've done, interviews, segments, head over to our YouTube channel, type in Can We Please Talk Podcast. We should pop right up. Audio podcast platforms, you know by now, Apple, Spotify, Google. Shout out to everybody who listens to us on Good Pods. Shout out to Acast, our hosting platform. Can't do it without them. Can't do it without each and every one of you that listens into this program. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
And damn sure never going to let Ann Coulter tell me anything about not voting for me because I'm in India. I'm Nick Saveri.
That's right. And I'm not going to listen to Kathy Hochul either about computers. We'll see everybody next time.